it just aligned with what I thought his superpower was at the time, and he had been living it authentically, is to identify the number one priority and give it all of your time and resources until it takes off. We started a climb where every quarter we sold more books than the next quarter for like the next 4.5 years. If you make people look smart, they will talk about your book. And when they
Yeah.
talk about your book, other people will read your book.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and from Austin, Texas. You know him from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent and the One Thing, Jay Papasan. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great, Remington. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yes, sir. Did I nail your name? I was
Nailed
really
it.
about it.
Nailed it.
I've said it wrong for years. You know, in the real estate circles, we say your name a lot.
I think everybody's been to Pier 1 at some point and seen a Papasan chair.
Is that
And
what happens?
I really wish that was our family legacy. You know, I probably wouldn't be sitting here, right? I'd probably be on some island luxuriating somewhere. But Papasan is the Z sound is what gets people. It used to be a French name.
Papasan. All right. Well, we're gonna roll on. Now that I've nailed your name, you have two books in the back. This is what I noticed about you, and this is why I think is admirable. We're gonna start here. You've got your book, which is an international bestseller, The One Thing, just massive hit. So much so that I was in my grandfather's library. He was pushing 90, can't even see anymore, cannot read, and he was never in the real estate circles. He has a book, The One Thing, in his library, and it was gifted to him by someone else who's not in real estate circles. So this book has just surpassed maybe even your own expectations. Just phenomenal, and it's behind you as it should be. And then you have another book behind you that I assumed was your latest work, Give to Grow, but it's not. It's actually a friend of yours, and you're just promoting him for free. How's that work?
Yeah, well, Mo Bunnell is a guy out of Atlanta. He was an actuary turned consultant, and he's maybe the smartest enterprise sales guy in the world. And he's just a giver. Like if you ever read The Go Giver back in the day, like that is Mo Bunnell to a T. And he has poured into me without ever asking. It's like he sent me a free copy of his book. It's like, hey, this is good. I'm just going to stick it in the background and give him some free advertising because he's a good dude. Good karma there.
That is great. I love it. Well, let's get back to your book. The One Thing, like I said, is what you're known for. But I'd like to start a little bit before that because that's obviously you've um, taught classes and principles from The One Thing. You spend a lot of time doing that, but you do have your real estate license. You are running a team, and more importantly, your wife is running the team. How did the union between you and Gary start? Were you a writer and he's like, "Hey, I need help," or were you an agent and you're like, "This guy's cool. Let's see if we can write a book together"? How does that happen?
So the short version is my wife and I left New York City and moved to Austin in February of 2000. And I had worked at HarperCollins Publishers for about 6.5 years as an editor and worked on some big nonfiction books. So books are my through line. I was a book nerd in high school. I worked in bookstores through college while waiting tables in bookstores. I got an English degree. I worked in publishing, like all the way through.
That's your
And
jam.
so we needed to leave New York when we started our family. And I was like, I'm from the South. And we both picked Austin. We didn't have jobs. So I freelanced for a while. My wife fired me from that job because I was not providing in our new marriage. I got some prestigious publications that weren't paying. And
Okay.
I took a job as a newsletter writer. There was no publishing in Austin back then, and there's still not much. And I just thought, I'll get a salary, I'll have a community around me, and I'll write on the side. And about 2 years into that journey, like when I joined Keller Williams, just to give you perspective, there were 27 employees and 6,700 agents.
No way.
Today, there's maybe 400 or 500 employees, and we've got like 170,000 agents in 58 countries. So it's like, it's been a rocket ride. But back then it was really small. And I was sitting in the tech department because I was writing a tech newsletter, and I saw one of the designers working on what was clearly a book cover. And I asked him, I was like, are you freelancing? That's cool. Because I just wanted to talk about books, like any chance to talk about books. And he goes, no, Gary and Dave, that would be Dave Jinks, our late co-author, are writing a book. And I was like, really? Maybe a week later, I ran into Gary in the bathroom he was plunging a toilet. He owned the building, and he made some joke about how the chairman of the board's not too proud to do whatever it takes, like, the work ethic thing. And we laughed and we're washing our hands. And I just said, Gary, I hear you're writing a book. He confirmed it. And I said, do you remember I used to work in publishing? And he had a moment. He's like, no. It's like, all right, I have an expert in the building. So he brought me into his office. He actually had a vision in 2000 for writing 13 books.
Okay.
And he pitched me on the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And I told him, I asked him some questions about how big Keller Williams was. But at that point, I think we had 14,000, right? We'd more than doubled since I joined. And I said, I think you'll sell 50,000 copies. And that would have been a huge number, right?
Sure.
For a business book back then.
Sure. Especially
So,
if you're counting on more people than just your own people to buy it.
right, right. But even I just thought through your network,
Mhm.
if the way you want to use it as a calling card, we wrote the book on big production, and it's agnostic to brand, right? We interviewed agents from that was his vision. I want to interview agents from every brand and come up with a common language around big success. I was like, awesome, great vision for a book. Um, I just told him that he was clearly disappointed and that was not big enough for him. So he went back into sales mode and he laid out 5 books that he and Dave had gone to the bookstore and said, these are our favorite business books. And we want to take elements of each of them.
Ooh.
And 2 of them were books I'd published at HarperCollins.
Really?
Yeah, that was like the crazy moment. I still get
And what
chills.
was your role? What was your role when you were the editor of those books, or what was your role in those?
I was assistant editor to the executive vice president of publishing at HarperCollins. And it's a
Great.
guy named David Hershey, who I did not nearly appreciate enough of what he was teaching me at the time because I worked like a dog back then for
Yeah.
no money at all. But he taught me a lot. But we published a book called Body for Life by Bill Phillips, and it changed the paradigm on how to burn fat. He
Mm.
was one of the first big voices to say it's not cardio, it's weightlifting.
Yeah.
And that book went on to sell millions of copies.
Yeah.
And I also am a soccer weenie. David Hershey is a very famous soccer weenie. Like he wrote a book with Pele. Like he is like, has columns in ESPN, you name it. And we bonded over soccer and we worked with Mia Hamm on her first book called Go for the Goal. And so I'm
Okay.
staring there and it's like, there's 2 of my proudest works in front of me. And I said, well, I know a lot about those 2 books. And I showed him my name and we were off to the races. He gave
Wow.
me 30 days to write a business plan. And he had worked with Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach,
Yeah.
and paid all this money to learn how to write a book. And I just kind of threw it in the trash can.
Oh man.
Because I mean, I was in charge of having to create, with authors like 20 to 30 books a year at Harper. Like we had a
Sure.
system for how to do this. And he gave me 30 days and we wrote the book with Dave Jinks in about 100 days. And then we
Okay.
self-published it and we sold 100,000 copies the first year. And then all the publishers, we got rejected by 25 publishers originally. The only one who said yes was the American Management Association. And they offered us $25,000 to publish it. And I told Gary, don't do it. They're
Mm.
not a big publisher. They're in the space, but like you're giving up all of your rights for 25 grand. You can write the check, we'll self-publish and see what happens. So we did it. We kind of blew it up. And then all of the
Was self-publishing not a big thing back then? Did you use Amazon?
we used Amazon. So we were the number 1 real estate book that first year, all year on Amazon. And it was a gross, ugly cover. Like we did a good job, but it wasn't beautiful.
Is
But
it the one you have now, the red one?
it looked a little pinkish because I
Okay.
didn't know enough about production. I was in editorial to know that you have to really do test runs on red to make sure you get the right shade.
Oh
So it was
wow.
a pinkish red, which I was a little
Okay.
embarrassed about. It looked like a textbook, but we sold 100,000 copies. And then McGraw Hill agreed to publish us. And instead of asking for a big advance, we just got the rights to do a lot of direct sales and a lot of rights with the book.
Give me perspective on what 100,000 copies is. What was number 2? What was good?
I don't remember, honestly. I can tell you back then, the conventional wisdom in publishing, if you were publishing with a major house, you would expect the average book to sell 1,500 copies.
1,500 copies at an average book. And then you
And
told Gary 50,000 was the cap of what he would sell all time or that first year?
all time, I thought
All
that would be
time.
a great. I mean, most books die after 18 months.
Sure.
right? They are still sold, but almost all the sales are front loaded. It's very, very, very hard to do a perennial bestseller. And so the fact that we had one wasn't
Mhm.
lost on us or the publishers. And like back, I remember when I would do P&Ls on books, like our break even, like this is worth it, is we would try to convince the editorial board that we could sell 10,000.
Oh, wow. 10,000.
And that's how low the bar was. But it's actually really, really hard to sell
Yeah.
books. I'm in a mastermind with Amy Porterfield. And when she launched her book, like her first aha is like, I can sell $1,000 classes all day long and I can't sell a $25 book.
Yeah.
And it is hard. So we've had a good run. I can't even remember. We were on the bestseller list on back then it was Business Week, like
Yeah.
every single month for like 4 years.
Did you have to what do you attribute aside from it being really well written and having connections on the front end, what do you attribute the success of 100,000 in the first year?
I'll tell you what I think makes all runaway bestsellers.
Okay.
Like outside of celebrity books, I'm talking about business books.
Mhm.
And this goes from my books to Bill Phillips to James Clear, you name it. I think that there's craft. I actually don't think we wrote I mean, I think we wrote a really good book, but like I am embarrassed at the writing at this stage because we've grown so much. But
Mhm.
it was good. But we gave the message that needed to be put in the world at that moment. We kind of caught the zeitgeist. And at that moment in time, Gary was tapping into it. Agents were seen by brokers as chattel. They were almost possessions, right? And they were salespeople. They were not talked to or treated like business people. And there was a strong desire among agents to be seen as a business person.
Mm.
And Gary accurately saw that wave, and we wrote a book to meet it. And he wanted to be the first brokerage to truly embrace that. So for years, there were no other teams. Like if you wanted to build a team, you came to Keller Williams
Yeah.
because we would accommodate you. We would cap our commission splits at a way that you could still build a business within our business.
Commissions, not just in theory.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
kind of teach people how to fish. We don't hand out leads, right? So it's a different philosophy. We attract a different kind of agent. But all that said, I think that you have to have a little element of luck. A little bit of timing finds you for a book to go on and on like that. You have to write a good book. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Bad books
That's
don't
good.
do that.
Mhm.
But good books can catch a wave and become the calling card for that moment in time. The one thing kind of showed up when people were overwhelmed. Smartphones had hit kind of their all-time high. Like when that book came out, every high school student had an iPhone. And we were
Mhm.
all asking the question, when are we at work? When are we at home? Because we were connected all time and we hadn't any system for an adaptation. And so we were catching the I'm overwhelmed wave. And I could go through a book nerdy analysis on a lot of books for you, but that is my theory.
Do you feel you mentioned celebrity book you're not including celebrity books, but do you feel like Gary had a little bit of celebrity status within the real estate community to boost it?
No,
No.
we only were able to interview 27 of the top 100 agents. Most of them wouldn't even take our call.
Wow.
We were only in 14 states back then. So they were like, Keller, who? Why should
Okay.
I talk to you about my business?
So I haven't asked you this, and you might not know the figure, but do you know how much that first book has sold all time now? Because how old is it? You said it was back in 2020,
We published it in 2003, self published it. And
2003.
then we came out with McGraw Hill in 2004, a year later. All told and all editions, around 1.6 million copies. I was a horrible estimator of sales.
Where does that rank in real estate books?
It's the by far the all time best selling real estate career book. I
Okay.
don't know if there are other sales books because I think of it as a career book more than a sales book. We don't teach scripts and stuff.
Because the
Uh,
one thing has surpassed that.
what's that?
The one thing has surpassed that, has it not?
Yes, it's in a different category. It is a
Yeah.
productivity book.
So you write that, and it becomes a massive success initially and ongoing. What is the process by which you're like, okay, now it's time to write the big dog, the one that surpasses? Because I told you at the beginning, like my grandpa was never in real estate. The person who gifted it to him was never in real estate, and I'm seeing this book everywhere. Having read it myself many times, but not thinking anyone outside of the industry has. But it's not true. Like it has surpassed all of that. And you're right. It's not necessarily just a real estate book. So how did that come about?
So I think Gary and I always had ambitions to break out of real estate. He wanted to be a thought leader, not just in real estate, but in business. And I'm all for that. I want to think bigger every time. Originally, we were going to write The Millionaire Small Business Owner. And that's still out there in the ether.
Hmm.
But this book showed up by accident. I was running our education. We wrote a course. He wrote an intro to it called The Power of One. And I remember we sat down on Monday afternoon to review it. And I just said, Gary, I think this is a book. And he goes, man, I thought the same thing. And it just aligned with what I thought his superpower was at the time. And he had been living it authentically is to identify the number one priority and give it all of your time and resources until it takes off. He's really willing to let every brush fire burn to do the thing that needs to be done. And not a lot of entrepreneurs are. And like the MREA is an example of that. He basically stopped running the company for a year to create the vehicle that would help us grow for the next 10.
So, how did the one thing take off? Did you use the principles of publishing and promoting and marketing for it like that you did on that first one, or did you use different tactics?
So the world had changed quite a bit by then. We had social media and all kinds of different channels to work with. We did a big book launch. We were a much larger company then. We had like 50, 60,000 agents at this point. So our first audience was always Keller Williams because we know if they feel ownership of our products, that they will hand them out,
Hmm.
right? You can't go into a Keller Williams office and not have someone offer you one of our books if you're a guest.
Hmm.
And so that's one of our primary sales channels. And I figure if we can make it a win for them and their clients, then we can extend it. So we did a book tour. We did all the traditional stuff. My aha, that what I learned was that busy people sometimes take as long as a year to read the book.
Oh
And I
wow.
remember watching our sales just slowly decline. We were selling, we sold 44,000 copies the first month. And then you look up almost a year later and we're down to like 400 a week. And I was like,
Okay.
wow, that was the wave. It's over, right? But I made a commitment with my coach. I'm a huge believer in coaching to do one thing every week to promote it. And at that time, I was getting invited on podcasts.
Okay.
And so I was just saying yes. I started to think about vetting them. Like, how many downloads do you have? And I was like, screw it. Like, this is a person who has a high trust relationship like you do, Remington, with your audience. There are people out there that are walking the dog or they're driving to their office and they're used to hearing your voice in their head. That
Right.
high trust relationship is an amazing thing to tap into and to have someone like you endorse your work. And so I started doing that. And then we started a climb where every quarter we sold more books than the next quarter for like the next 4.5 years.
And you attribute that to being on saying yes to every show.
Yes, and also word of mouth. So those two things connected. We never stop promoting it. Like that's the theme, right? Always lead gen. We never stop. Most authors are done in 3 months, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Go forth and be fruitful. Good book. I'm working on the next one." And I stayed very, very dedicated to continuing to promote it, which I do think you're constantly putting new energy in the flywheel. And the real flywheel in book sales is word of mouth. And I learned that from Body for Life. When
Hmm.
people talk about your book, you help make them smarter. Did you know at a cocktail table, right? Did you know this fact? Like, if you make people look smart, they will talk about your book. And when they
Yeah.
talk about your book, other people will read your book. And that year tail, like when I started looking into it, I was finding out that even some of our internal leaders had taken a year because they're busy entrepreneurs to actually read the
Sure.
book. And they're like, wow, this is great. I'm going to share it with everybody.
Okay, so when you made the comment that busy people take a year to read the book, what was happening is they were buying it. So you see an initial spike of sales, but then they weren't reading it, and so there wasn't the promotion. But when they read it a year later, that's when you got the second wave because they read it and you brought value. They got value out of it, and that's when the second wave started.
Yes. I mean, think about a real estate business. You know this industry. You start out and you have to hunt for every sale. You do a good job. People on average move every 7 years, but we know the referral process starts earlier if you're following up. You follow up with those buyers and sellers you helped the first year, and some of them say, I'm moving again, repeat business, or I know someone who is. And the two engines that drive big real estate success, like Every business I analyze, about 50% of their sales by year 10 or more are coming from repeat and referral. So there's a point of do a good job and stay long enough, and this tail will catch you. Because of the nature of real estate, people moving so infrequently, it takes a lot longer. But I think the average CEO reads like 20 books a year or something like that. And entrepreneurs read a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
by the time they read it, our cycle moves faster in the book world. It's a lower price product.
How many books do you read a year?
I try to read 50 every year.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever done it.
Is it all business books with you?
No, no. I started in fiction, so I try to read about half and half.
Mm.
And I usually end up between 45 and 48. And my wife is always, because she's like an achiever, she's like, why don't you just read short books in December? And I'm like, no, I'm reading the books. Read for what you need.
Yeah.
Read for what you need. And the fiction is about me just understanding the human condition and just that I enjoy it. So I want to read for pleasure. And then I very selectively read business books around what I need to learn.
I'm in a different stage of life of you with kids. We were talking about in the pre-show the age of your kids. I think a funny thing that you started doing, you said the average human looks at their cell phone 87 times a day. Is that what you said?
Yep.
And so you thought, hey, if I'm going to look at it that much, I might as well be inspired by my own cell phone. Can you share with the audience what you have on your cell phone?
So, one of our techniques in helping people with the one thing, like we say, the foundation of everything is purpose. Purpose is really heavy. Like most people don't have a real clue what their mission is in life, but our shortcut hack is to help them identify their top three core values and then make big decisions based on how well they align with those. And mine are impact, family, and abundance.
Mhm.
So I went on Canva, I created a little screensaver. So every time my phone comes to life, I see those three values and it just kind of reinforces like, am I living them or not?
So I'm going to put you on the hot. See, I told you I was going to do this. I think people will give you flack for saying, well, family has to be at the top. Why is family not at the top? And I asked you that. I thought your answer was really good and fascinating. What's your answer to that?
So for the first probably 5 years, family was first. It was family, impact, and abundance. And there's lots of videos of me talking about that. And I told people, like, don't go get a tattoo because this could change. That's what the research said, right? It evolves. And
Yeah.
it did for me. My kids are 20 and 18 today. And about 2 years ago, I was doing my year end reflection. And I was like, I wasn't making as many decisions around family as I thought.
Mm-hmm.
I was really first asking the question, will this make a big impact in the world? Will this help people? And that was my primary. So I just was honest. And I feel an obligation as a teacher and someone people are looking up to lead them to live this book, to be honest about it. So it was tough, but you know what? Hey, that's the truth. I need to lead with that number one core value. It doesn't mean I don't love my family, right? I also look at it as setting an example for my kids,
Yeah.
right? That is the thing that I want to live in integrity with so that they will choose to live in integrity with their values, not what the world thinks they should do.
Well, it is an interesting perspective too, because your kids are in their 20s. They're leading their own families. I'm in a stage of life where I have 8, 7, 5, and 10 weeks. So I only read
You're in the
24.
trenches, buddy.
I I I only read 24 books a year, and I feel good about that number. But with everything else I have going on, I think that number will go up when I become an empty nester.
Yeah.
So
Clearly, you're not counting the picture books you read every night.
oh, that's true. I do not. I do not. I'm in the hundreds, buddy. Yeah, we're crushing it there. Jay, I told you in the pre-show we were talking about the birth of real producers and how essentially I was a vendor selling cutlery as closing gifts and struggling to reach the top realtors. So creating real producers was my attempt at bringing the top realtors in a community to vendors who would pay for it. That's really the story of real producers in a nutshell. When I told you that story, you had mentioned that you were writing about this concept called "Build Your Cathedral," and I thought that was fascinating. What does that mean?
So, in my newsletter, The 20 Percenter, I wrote an article that really resonated for a lot of people. And I just said, I think it was called Build Your Cathedral. And it came from this idea that when you know who your avatar is, what can you do to bring them to you versus having you go out and seek prospect versus market? And the story I think I told was a couple of them. early on in Gary's career, there was a famous preacher, and he would say, if you want the world to come to you, every day set yourself on fire and they will come to spectate. And it was like one of those weird famous statements, you know.
Yep.
And when Mo Anderson was helping him grow the company, she bought these fancy suitcases. And he said, "You're not getting on a plane." She's like, "What do you mean? I'm going to have to travel and grow the business." He's like, "No, you're not." He's like, "They're going to come to us." And he told that story. And the idea is if you build, people spend centuries building cathedrals, right? Some of them literally take hundreds of years. And
Sure.
people will travel around the world to go visit them.
Mhm.
And the idea is, can you do that for your business? What can I build that will attract the people I most want to serve so that there's a line outside of my door? And Shift, we wrote about it. We called it a MOFR, make offers for immediate response. How can you do something? And I think about Tim Howe's Homeward, right? I think about Ryan's Fellow. Like some people have created products that people just, their phone starts ringing. And
Yeah.
that's a great thing to do. So, what's your cathedral? You built real producers, and now you've built a relationship that naturally attracts the people you want to serve and do business with.
Man, I love that. Build your cathedral. Is that something that can be duplicated on the micro level for
Yeah.
agents?
Yeah. I think any platform that feels special will attract people. So, I'll give you two examples. My senior year in high school, my best friend Brian and I, he asked the question because he was like, he became a philosophy major. So I was gifted to have deep thinkers with me early in my life. He goes, "What girls do you think we would regret not asking out, even if they don't say yes when we graduate?" And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's a long list," because I was a very late bloomer. I didn't start really dating until I was in 11th grade. And so we went through the, the, um, the yearbook
Yeah.
and we made a list of every girl and, you know, from 10th grade to 12th grade that we would hope to ask out. And
Yeah.
we made a pact. And almost every Saturday, we did a double date. And we started with the ones we thought would say yes. And we had this very cheap date plan. We would buy some firewood, we'd go to the park, we would have a picnic in the park. That was it.
Wow.
Like a
That's a great.
$5 date with, you know,
Yeah.
apple cider and like very cheap, cool stuff.
Sure.
Just a fun experience.
Yeah.
And people, the word got around. They'd say, like, "You asked me out, like, we barely know each other." And like, we just tell them, it's like, "Hey, we were looking at the yearbook and we're like, we're going to graduate. We're all going to go out in the world." And I was like, "I thought I might regret not having a chance to get to know you." Well,
Wow.
guess what? Now it became a thing. It's like, am I on that list?
Sure. Oh,
And
wow.
so, like, that became a weird kind of accidental platform for
Mhm.
about, for, I guess, right after the book came out. I knew that my one thing in the businesses I was a part of, like being a best-selling author, opens doors. So my coach and I came up with the plans like you should be networking and you can attract talent to all these businesses and relationships. But I'm an introvert. So we
Mhm.
had listed all of these conventions I was going to attend, and I was just filled with a cold knot of dread.
Mm.
And someone invited me to an interview at over a coffee. And I sat down and this woman interviewed me and bought me coffee. And I said, "What is this anyway?" And she goes, "I have a blog called Coffee with a Stranger. And every week I just have coffee with a stranger and write about it." And I was like, "That's so cool. I'm going to steal that." And so I went back, ditched the idea of going to conventions, and I made a commitment to every week meet someone for coffee that someone would rightfully call talent and earn the right to get them in my database. And it was all cold outreach the first year. I was going out to LinkedIn saying, "Hey, you know, so and so said that like you started this great business called Real Producers. Would you be willing to let me buy you a cup of coffee? I'm not selling anything. I just want to get to know you." And I would just show up and say, "Have you read this book?" Whatever. The
Yeah.
first year I did 50. It exhausted me socially. And
Yeah.
I quit with like 3 weeks to go. I was not interested in breaking the goal. The
Yeah.
next year, people started referring people to me, and I did 79. And the next year, I had invitations to do 129, and I had to say I stopped. And then
Wow.
I capped it at trying to do one, sometimes two per week. And that
And
became
this is
my
all for the
cathedral.
sole purpose of introducing the concept in the book?
No, no. My only goal was to start the foundational process of building a relationship with a stranger
That person with the
that
network.
was talented,
Yeah.
right? You have a reputation as being one of the best designers in town. Tell me what that journey's like. I wasn't selling anything or they wouldn't have referred me.
Yeah.
But then it became a thing of like, I know someone else you should meet, because it feels complimentary to say, I know this guy and he's just trying to meet the coolest, most talented people in town. I thought
Sure.
of you. Like it becomes that sort of thing that
That's
people want to
cool.
pass on.
Mhm.
And my wife made fun of me. She's the real estate guru. She's like, so
Mhm.
your goal is to meet one stranger a week? Because like you're a loser. She laughed at me. But I'm really good at marathons.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this for 9 years,
Yeah.
and I've probably added at least 500 incredibly talented people to my phone. And a few years later, I started sending them a monthly newsletter. I asked them, would you mind if I also invited you to be a part of this? That's how I stay in touch as an introvert. I'll share
Yeah.
what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what my family's doing. Very personal, not a sales email. And it's just a monthly. And if you don't like it, unsubscribe and I'll never know. And after the first month, I never looked again because
Wow.
Noah Kagan, I was so proud that he signed up and he unsubscribed after one issue. And I was like, I'm devastated. I can't do this.
Yeah, my ego cannot take that.
No, it's like, but also it became a promise. Like, I won't judge you. Like, nobody wants an email they don't want. But the last thing I write every month is, please reply back and tell me what you're up to.
Man.
And that became a kind of database energy for me where people would reply back every month and, hey, well, let's go grab a coffee or let's get together with our wives. And it built energy. And I've hired, gosh, dozens and dozens and dozens of people from that list or been referred to them and started a couple of businesses from that.
Man. So Jay, is your list small then that you send the newsletter to, or has it grown based on
Less
it?
than 600 now.
It's less than 600. So you send a newsletter to less than 600 people because you could buy lists. You could,
Yeah.
every single person you come in contact with put on the list, but it's a curated list of people that you've had coffee with
Yep.
and asked to send the newsletter to. That is phenomenal. I love that.
You have
Or
to build hacks that overcome your natural limitations, right? Models drive big success. I knew that no one succeeds alone. That's a mantra around here. Like we know that if you're going to build something extraordinary, you will not do it alone. And
Mhm.
as an introvert, my tendency is to be a tasker, to be really, really good at doing the stuff. Whereas I should be being better at surrounding myself with talented people to help me. And so
Yeah.
that my cheat was I'm good at one-on-one. That's why I like doing podcasts. I
Mhm.
like just getting to know people. And I don't look like an introvert in this setting. So
Yeah.
I can get together. I love telling people books to read and opening doors for them and connecting people. And so it became a value proposition that I would actually do. And the hack for me was like, I also am addicted to coffee. And so I was like, great, I'm going to go get a good cup of coffee today at my favorite coffee shop and meet someone that'll probably inspire me.
Did you say proposition? I thought I heard you say
Value
I was like,
proposition is what I
a
meant,
value
but maybe,
proposition. I was
yeah,
like,
I
man, that's a
wasn't.
great play on his name. I'm buying the website right now. Jay, I think much like the one thing, the value you have brought to this show just surpasses real estate. It surpasses business. It's just great life advice and just really cool story. Thank you for sharing. Where can we find you? What are you up to now?
Huh, what am I up to? That's the name of my newsletter, ironically.
Is it really?
And so, yeah, what I'm up to, they can go to jpapazan.com. And I think maybe for real estate entrepreneurs, the best thing they could do is either link from there or just go to the 20 percenter. Every week, I write a very short essay, usually a 2 to 3 minute read about what I imagine real estate entrepreneurs might be struggling with. And I just love that journey. I've been doing it for a little over 2 years. And it forces me. My wife said, why are you doing this to yourself? You're writing every weekend. And I said, it's like the Rocky movie where he's out chasing chickens. This is my
Mhm.
fitness regime so that when I sit down to write books, I write them faster.
I love it. We'll share that link in the show notes. Jay, thanks for being on, the famous co-author of The One Thing and the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. If you want to influence who we have on the show or what we talk about, email us at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Jay, I hope to be seeing you soon.
Thank you so much.